Well, hey, everybody, thanks for taking a little time today. Thanks for being on the line. This is Congressman Adam Kinzinger, and we have a couple of special guests with us today that I'll interview in a little bit. But one of the things we're doing is just giving people an opportunity to hear from these doctors. We want to talk a little about what's going on, particularly with the vaccination situation and COVID generally. So, obviously, it's kind of a quote-unquote gift that keeps giving. We find ourselves seeming to win the war on COVID, and then, all of a sudden we get a new variant, and we kind of find ourselves fighting with each other over, whether we should wear a mask or get vaccinated. But the reality is, it's just punching through this country like wildfire, and one of the best defenses we can have against the COVID virus is to get vaccinated. And so one of the big things we want to do is, again, we've got a couple of guests, a couple of doctors that are very, very knowledgeable and very much understand this stuff on the line to take your questions. So what I want to do is say at the beginning here, if you have a question for either of these doctors with regards to COVID, the vaccine, hit *3. So you'll hit *3 on your phone. I'll repeat that a few times as we get through this, and, because we're going to have new people join the line, so I don't want to be repetitive, but they may not have heard it yet. And again, *3, that'll get you in the queue for any questions you have with regards to this. But we really wanted to just touch base and talk about this vaccine situation. Right now, just a couple of facts to start. So as of this week, Illinois is administering an average of 23,000 vaccinations per day. On August 18th, the Biden administration announced a plan for booster shots where any American over the age of 18 who received a COVID vaccination is now eligible for a booster shot 8 months following their second dose of the vaccine. I'm in that, by the way, so I intend to go get a booster shot here soon. And yesterday, the FDA announced the approval of the Pfizer vaccine for those 16 and older. So as many of you may have known, it was approved under an emergency use authorization, went through all the studies that they have to put it through to be appropriate, and yesterday they approved it with full FDA approval. And I know a lot of people were waiting to get vaccinated until that came through. Well, the good news is it's come through, and we expect both Moderna and Johnson & Johnson to follow suit shortly. So again, it's *3 if you want to ask a question. If you're just joining, we're focusing today on the questions you may have about vaccination and particularly too about COVID. For our two guests today, I'm going to introduce them and then turn it over for a couple comments, and then we can go to our questions. *3 if you have a question. Our first guest, and I'll introduce them both, and then kick it over to our first guest. So, Dr. Vishnu Chundi is the chairman of the COVID task force for the Chicago Medical Society. Dr. Chundi is also a senior partner at the Metro Infectious Disease Consultants, which he joined in 1995, and it's now the largest infectious disease practice in the United States. And he's witnessed two pandemics now, HIV and now the SARS-CoV-2. Our other guest is Dr. Edward Lin. Dr. Lin is a trustee of the Chicago Medical Society and co-chair of the COVID-19 task force. He is the former professor and interim chair of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Rush University Medical Center and Rush Medical College. And I know from having heard him before, he'd be happy to answer any questions you have about, maybe if you're pregnant. My wife is pregnant, for instance, and she got vaccinated, but I know she had some questions before that. So, again, *3 if you want to ask a question. This is Congressman Adam Kinzinger, but I'll kick it over to our first doctor. Appreciate you being on the call, Dr. Chundi.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, Congressman Kinzinger. So, as a background, so our group covers multiple states, not just Illinois, but we're also in Georgia, we're in Alabama, we're in Arizona, we're in Michigan, we're in Missouri, we're in Kansas. So we're watching this whole tragedy the second time unfold, and the thing that is upsetting is now we're losing about 1,000 Americans a day. And the trajectory of the deaths and the hospitalizations is eerily similar to what happened earlier. Today I rounded to 2 hospitals from 6:30 in the morning, and literally 80% of the patients that were admitted were COVID patients, not the usual, I had a gallbladder, I got infected. And the sad part of it is almost 100% of them were vaccinated individuals. So it's now we have 1,000 deaths a day, of which 98 to 99% are preventable. And Americans are smart people. We do know that age equals wisdom now, because it's proven, because 91% of Americans over 65 have been vaccinated with at least one dose and 81% with 2 doses. So we're hoping to convince everyone else who's had questions now with the FDA approval to go ahead and get vaccinated, because vaccination is the single best way of preventing spread. The vaccines still work, and we're here to take questions, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, because really I want to hear from everyone about their questions. And just as an aside, we were taking care of 150,000 COVID patients. Now we're crossing 170,000 COVID patients. So too many patients. We'd like to see less patients with COVID.
Well, thank you. And, the interesting thing is I remember, kind of early on in the pandemic, there were people that believed that the pandemic wasn't real or COVID wasn't real. And, now obviously we all know it is. Then during that time we were begging for a vaccine, and, we got it really in miraculous time. And now we just want to, help people to. If you have any uncertainty or you read something on the internet that says don't get the vaccine, it's your chance to bring that up. So again, star 3 if you want to ask a question. Our other guest, we're so happy to have him too, is Dr. Edward Lynn. Dr. Lynn?
Good evening, Congressman. It's really my honor to be here and to help out in this effort. As a little bit of background, I never thought that I'd be using my virology and immunology background after I chose to go into OBGYN for my career. But we find ourselves facing a significant threat, and I joined the group in an effort to try to help educate those people regarding the vaccine and the disease itself. Just for a very brief comment in terms of pregnant women. The news is all good up to date. In the beginning, there were a lot of questions about whether pregnant women should receive the vaccine, because many of you may be aware of the fact that pregnant women weren't included in the original clinical trial. That's over a year ago, and now we have tens of thousands of women who've been vaccinated. Unfortunately, COVID in pregnancy is not trivial and can lead to a significant infection, which does cause complications with premature deliveries, and there have been a significant increase in deaths in pregnant women who acquire the infection. So the infection tends to be more severe, despite the fact that most pregnant women are young and very, very healthy. The good news is that the vaccine is extraordinarily well tolerated. I'm talking about the 2 mRNA vaccines, one produced by Pfizer and Moderna. And we now know that the side effect rate from these vaccines is extraordinarily low. And it's really not any different whether a person is pregnant or not. But here's some interesting information that has been being accumulated. And a recent study again confirmed what has been observed earlier in the year, that the antibodies that are produced by the vaccine appear to cross the placenta fairly efficiently and go into the baby. That's called passive immunity, and it's actually something which is desirable. And that's one of the reasons why we recommend, in fact, recommending vaccination against other infections such as pertussis and diphtheria when women are pregnant. Influenza, we recommend vaccination for these similar reasons. And recent studies again confirmed that in the breast milk of nursing moms, the antibodies, the 2 types, the blood antibody IgG and the oral antibody IgA, cross. And again, we're hoping that this will help provide immunity for a short period of time, because remember, neonates depend on the mother's immunity for when they're actually first born, because it takes them a while to be able to become resistant to diseases, and certainly a while before we would give them a vaccine. And I'd be glad to answer any more questions about these issues as desired. So, Congressman, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And again, everybody, for those just joining, if you want to ask a question, it's star 3 We're talking today about the vaccines. We know there's a lot of people with some hesitancy out there, and so we wanted to answer those questions and talk about anything related to COVID like that, with the questions that people have. Let me first go. So I want to just quick housekeeping. Here's how it's going to work. Just the way the program is, you can ask your question, and then basically once you ask your question, you'll be muted and removed from the queue. So if you try to respond and nobody's responding to you, that's why. It's not that you're being ignored or anything. So let me first go to, we're going to go to Piper City and Bill. Hey, Bill, are you there?
Yes.
Hey, go ahead.
Yeah, my question was, what's the percentage of vaccinated to non-vaccinated people in the hospital?
That's a great question. Whoever wants to take that over.
Oh, I will take that in a heartbeat. Almost 95% of the people admitted to the hospital today are unvaccinated individuals. If you take the intensive care unit, it is 99% of the individuals. Of the 5% that are vaccinated that are coming in, they're exclusively people with other conditions, chronic lung disease, leukemia, lymphoma, other conditions that put them at risk. Healthy individuals that are vaccinated are not seen in the hospital. So it's really disproportionately the ones that are unvaccinated, and in the vaccinated, what are called the so-called breakthrough infections, are people with other medical conditions that are coming in.
And let me actually ask you a follow-up on that, because it's one I get from people a lot. So they say, well, if there's breakthrough infections, and obviously I think the answer is, that you don't get hospitalized as highly. But it's like, if there's a breakthrough infection, what good is this vaccine? So maybe if you want to talk about this, what's the benefit of having it, even if you get a breakthrough infection, and why is it still beneficial regardless? I guess more from a kind of actual medical perspective, I guess.
So, there are many types of viruses, and coronaviruses, much like your cold, much like your flu, are what are called mucosal viruses. So these are viruses that hang out in your nose and your throat. There are no vaccines that prevent 100% of the time these viruses from attaching to your nose or throat and spreading it to others. What they do prevent is that virus from, again, going to the next portion, which is your lungs and vital organs, and causing damage and death. And that's why you see an extraordinary safety profile and the fact that it prevents death and hospitalizations in otherwise healthy people. So, and as time goes on with these mRNA vaccines, the reason why they're so safe is they don't hang out in your body. And so there's a degradation of the effectiveness of the vaccine over 6 months to 8 months. Thus the booster shots. Plus, the other wild card is this virus has changed. We have a whole new type of virus now that the vaccines are effective against, but the virus is 1,000 times more virus in the nose than it was in the original virus that came out of China. The virus is much more lethal than it was before, which is something that we didn't think happened, but has happened. And so all vaccines are designed to prevent death in human beings. There are very few vaccines that prevent what are called sterilizing immunity. That means you can't even get infected. And that's smallpox. And even measles doesn't prevent 100% of the time you from carrying measles. It prevents you from spreading a ton of measles. So the amount of virus is less. You spread it to less people. And there was a recent study in pre-published literature that shows even in breakthrough infections for so-called vaccinated people, the culturable virus, that means a live virus, is much less, and most of the virus that you're finding is dead virus. So the vaccines work. So most of the vaccines that you get in your nose are actually dead. So that's a good thing.
That's great. Let me go next to, let's go to Fairbury, and it's Sam. Sam, are you there?
Yeah, my question is, I'm fully vaccinated, and I'm going to be eligible for the booster, I understand now, after 8 months after my second shot. I've had some people suggesting that if you had Pfizer, get the Moderna, or if you had the Modernas, when you get your booster, get the Pfizer, that maybe if you get the other one, you might pick up some immunity from it that the other one didn't have. Is there anything to that? Thank you.
Thanks, Sam, and I'll turn that over to the docs.
That's a great question. The approval is for the same vaccine currently. There are trials going on, mixing and matching vaccines, but that has not yet been proven in studies. So currently, if you had a Pfizer, you get the Pfizer. If you had the Moderna, you get the Moderna. From just a medical perspective, there's probably not much difference between the two. I mean, people are talking over minor differences. But I'm so happy that you got vaccinated. I hope you're convincing all your friends who may be vaccinated or vaccine hesitant to go out and get vaccinated. And this vaccine with the booster dose ups your protectiveness upwards of 90% because it was waning to around 70%. And so you really are. It does help you get more immunity and prevent you from spreading it to others. So the booster is very good. So I'm really happy that you're getting the booster vaccine.
Well, thank you.
Let me just chime
go ahead.
in a little bit. Many people are probably hearing a lot of reports coming out of Europe, specifically England, where they have ongoing research trials with the types of vaccines that they're being used there. For instance, the AstraZeneca vaccine. And it may not have performed quite as well as the mRNA vaccines that we use exclusively, pretty much exclusively in the United States. And they are talking about adding one of the different vaccines as a booster in an effort to complement the two different types of vaccine platforms. So that background information you're going to be hearing about, but that's really now being looked at scientifically. And currently we're recommending getting the same vaccine that you received as your original one.
Let me ask you guys too while we're on this subject. Can you maybe briefly explain kind of what mRNA is? Because I still have a difficult time fully understanding it. I know there's a lot of misinformation out there, because it sounds eerily similar to DNA, that it changes your DNA. So can somebody address maybe kind of the science of what an mRNA vaccine really is?
Ed, you're the virologist in this, so go
ahead.
ahead.
So let's go back, maybe if people put on their high school biology memory hat, and you pointed this out very correctly, Congressman. Think of DNA as residing in the nucleus of the cell. And that's the material that makes up our genes and makes up the genetic material in the cell. mRNA is messenger RNA, and that's actually a fragment of coding. These are little codes. They're not numerical codes. They're actually we call amino acid base pair codes, which go from the nucleus to little protein factories in the cellular cytosol or cytoplasm, which is the rest of the cell, and they tell these little factories what proteins to manufacture. And there's millions of these things going on, as we're talking in our bodies. And so what the beauty of these vaccines is that we now have a method of introducing the code, and this code is specific for a group of proteins found on the spike of these coronaviruses. And you may see pictures of coronaviruses. They look like a little ball with little horns coming off of it. And those are the spikes, and that's what attaches. And so it was theorized, in the past, but these are not new, actually. This type of vaccine was first developed in the beginning of 2001. That we're going to make antibodies against those, which will bind up and make it the ability of the virus to attach to our cells and to transmit an infection very little. So all of this mRNA activity is going on in the cytoplasm. It does not go into the nucleus with these mRNA vaccines. Therefore, it cannot cause mutations. It's just a simple signal to produce these proteins. Once these proteins are secreted by the cell, our body recognizes them as foreign, and we make antibodies, and we have lymphocytes, T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes, who become programmed to aid in the immune response. And if you think about it, it's very short-lived because we have enzymes, we're full of enzymes called RNases, which will digest these mRNA molecules very, very quickly. When they're initially put in the vaccine, they have a little lipid coat, like a little lipid envelope that keeps them protected from the RNases for a few days that allow them to stimulate the immune system. So I hope I've answered that question for you, Congressman, and not confused anybody.
No, that's great. Thank you. Okay, next we'll go to I think it's Jody and Roberts. Jody, are you there?
Hi, I am. Thank you.
Hey, what's up?
Well, I had both shots, Moderna, and on my first shot, I had a severe allergic reaction. I mean, it was like having COVID all over again, because I had that back in November at Thanksgiving, the worst time ever. Couldn't eat. But my second shot, I had nothing. So I'm wondering, and I will get the booster, I'm wondering if they have any idea if the booster is going to affect you, because I really don't want to go through a bad symptom again.
I understand. Well, thanks, Jody. Let me just say, too, the interesting thing, so I got Pfizer, and the first shot was fine. Second shot, I had the reaction for a couple of days. My wife, who has had COVID, had a reaction on the first shot and nothing on the second. It seems like those that have had COVID are more apt to have it on the first shot. But, doctor, do you want to take away the question about, what to expect from getting the booster?
Sure. I think in full disclosure, I too had COVID early on because we were taking care of so many COVID patients. And then, when I first got my vaccine, I didn't have much of a reaction. I had fevers and chills for a day. Took a little Tylenol, got better. And then the second dose, I was on call on that Friday, and I got my dose, and it wiped me out for Saturday and Sunday, but I was fine by Monday. Not an uncommon reaction. It's because your immune system is really good. I suspect you'll have a little bit of a reaction, but you must understand, if you've ever gotten a tetanus shot, my worst reactions have been to tetanus shots and DPT, the pertussis portion of the vaccines. So this means your immune system is good. It's actually a good reaction. This is an unbelievably safe vaccine. Are there no reactions? No. There are some reactions that are severe. Okay, but it's so far and few between. The coronavirus, just to give you an example, the coronavirus, if you get infected, okay, in children, 1 in 40 children will suffer from heart problems. The vaccine causes 1 in 20 to 40,000 issues. Not severe, and almost all of them get better. And the same thing goes, you can go down the line. The vaccines are, by a factor of 1,000, safer than the actual natural immunity. And natural immunity actually fades faster than the vaccine-induced immunity. So, Jody, I'm glad you got the vaccine, and I'm really proud of the fact that you will go ahead and getting the booster, setting a great example, and I hope you convince others around you to do the same thing.
All right, well, thanks. Now let's go. Again, if you didn't hear initially, star 3 if you want to ask a question. We'll be doing another 10 minutes or so, but for those that have been in the queue for a while, or if you haven't gotten in the queue to ask a question, just want to let you know, you will have an opportunity at the end. It's kind of an answering machine thing. You can leave any comments or questions there as well. So if we can't get to you, you'll still have that opportunity. We'll get back to you. So let's go next to Pontiac, and it's Jim. How are you, Jim?
Good. My question was, I had COVID, and I've had both shots. Do I need the third shot?
That's a good question. Thanks, Jim. So I guess the question is basically...
So one question I have for Jim is, how old is he, and does he have any other medical problems?
I'm 78, and I am diabetic.
You absolutely need the booster, Jim, because if you look at all people... Okay, I'm 58. I just turned 58 a couple of days ago. I'm young, and I have no comorbidities. So I have a little bit of benefit from the shot, but you really benefit from the shot. People over 65 and 70, your immune system is just not as good. That's just part of aging as we get old. And then diabetes puts you at risk. If you've got a little bit of a belly, it puts you at risk. If you've got heart disease, if you've got bad lung disease, it puts you at risk. So absolutely requires shot. So go ahead and get your booster.
Okay, I had a cardiologist just had a fit because I got my shot. He said I had the real thing when I had COVID and I didn't need the shot. And that's what the reason that I wondered about the booster.
Yeah, a lot of cardiologists don't seem to understand immunology and the way vaccines work. The person, I've had several physicians that we've talked to about this because they have their preformed belief systems, not based on science, but what they've heard. They haven't really read up on this or digested it. The people that really know this are like people like Paul Offit. You can go see. He's one of the guys who wrote the book called Vaccine, and he's on the internet. He does a great job explaining all of this, and he's devoted his whole life to vaccine. So, I would suggest that I'll be happy to talk to your cardiologist and explain why natural immunity is not as good as vaccine immunity, and that's why we have vaccines.
All right, great. Thank you. Let's go to Ashcombe, and I believe it's Matthew. Are you there, Matthew?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, go ahead.
I was curious if you could donate blood or donate, a kidney or whatever after you get the shot.
The answer is yes.
Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I think I cut you off when you answered that.
This is Edwin. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to talk over you. The answer is yes. Okay. The vaccination doesn't prevent you from donating blood or organ.
Yeah, it's actually better because especially if you're planning on donating an organ, do it before you get the surgery, because surgery may be a little bit of an immune suppressive condition. So get vaccinated before you donate.
All right. Let's go now to DeKalb. DeKalb. I think it's John. You there, John?
Yep, I'm here.
Hey, what's up?
Yep. Not much. I have a question. It's pretty much for my daughter. She claims that she doesn't want to take the shots because she says she has neurological damage and that the shots would harm her in some way, or it would affect her in some way. And our family members were trying to argue with her, and we were having a hard time trying to convince her. She's into Eastern medicine. I don't know if that has any criteria about, why she would be objecting to that.
Well, that's a good. I'll let the doctors answer that. Now, but I want to say just real quickly first too, docs, if you guys want to maybe add, how to maybe in your experience to talk to somebody that's anti-vax or vaccine hesitant, and I'll let you go from there. Go ahead.
I'll take the neurological stuff. So, there's now more than 250 million doses, actually more than 300 million doses of vaccine given. There are very small subset of people that may suffer some neurological issues, most of them which are reversible. The virus itself will cause much more neurological harm than the vaccine. The vaccines have very, 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 very rare side effects of small nerve damage, but most of it gets better. So your daughter should not be worried about that, because the natural infection is many times worse than the vaccination itself. And most of these can be monitored and handled. And you have to remember, in 200 years of vaccinology, 200 years of giving vaccines, there has been no major side effect of a vaccine 2 months after the dose of the vaccine. Now we're into August, so we've been giving the vaccine since December. We have 9 months of data, and the data are pretty good that you do not have significant neurological issues with this vaccine. So we'd be happy to talk to your daughter about this. And as far as talking to anti-vaxxers, there's several groups, and Ed, I'd like to have Ed chime in on this because Ed has been doing this a lot longer than I have, even though I am catching up. There's a core group of people that there's no point in sitting there trying to convince them, because they have hard and fast beliefs that vaccines are not bad. But the majority of the people that are vaccine hesitant, we need to explain to them and answer their questions. And and many of them are absolutely legitimate questions that they have out of misinformation, fear, not understanding how vaccines work. And so you need to talk to your physician and understand that 99% of that stuff on the internet that you're reading has some slant to it. You need to go to authoritative figures, and the authoritative figures are CDC, are the vaccinologists of this world that really give you good information. Ed, would you like to chime in since you've been dealing with this for a while?
Absolutely. I think the most important thing, and again, I think there's a number of populations that we can call anti-vaxxers, and we may have people that are hesitant just because they're anxious or they're confused or they really have questions that have not been adequately answered. So the first thing I like to do is try to learn what the concern of the individual has, and then see if we can try to quell those concerns with information, and try to point out the science. I'll give you a good example now, and young reproductive age women may be aware of this, but there's a lot of misinformation, which I'll also call malicious mythology, which is on the internet, involving that the vaccines cause infertility. And I can tell you that this has been looked at very carefully by the best experts in the field, and we have a society, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, the ASRM, which is our infertility society, the American College of OBGYN, which I'm a member of, and there is absolutely no scientific basis for that, and it's not a true statement. We have to kind of be patient and explain that to people, because they may have read it on the internet, they may have heard it from a well-intentioned individual who's confused, but some of the information is being placed in the media. I shouldn't say the media, but in the internet, Facebook, other communication forums, social media, by individuals that have an agenda, and we don't know why they have this agenda, but they're going to put exaggerated mistruths there, and we have to work with people to understand that. I don't know if I can convince those people to look at it through my lens of a scientist, because they appear to have another agenda beyond that, and I think we just have to work our way through it.
And some of them are selling stuff. There's a physician, a DO. There's like 6 people who actually propagate 80% of the lies out on the internet. and a lot of them are selling stuff on the other side of it to save you from COVID. So it's this whole thing with like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. Initially those were identified as possible agents, then science showed it didn't work. We should move on to now that we actually have good therapy, we should move on to the good therapy and stop holding on to bad stuff. You can see by how many people are dying, it's half as what it was before, because we've gotten better at taking care of these patients, and that's just an advancement of science.
That's a great point. Go ahead.
The ivermectin is really frustrating because many people on the call don't realize that is a veterinary drug that was developed for animals to get rid of worms, and you may have heard the reports, but there are people in some of our states that are getting severely ill by taking this and are showing up in the emergency room, and it's totally a bad idea, but it's being propagated.
I've got somebody very close to me that refuses to get vaccinated. This person has always been against any vaccine, and just recently got COVID and took that ivermectin horse paste stuff. And I'll tell you, I'm not going to get into an argument with her. Not my wife, by the way, said her, but I'm not going to get into an argument because I can't. There's no purpose. And it won't convince her, but I am amazed that with all the science behind vaccination, and then there's, a few talk show hosts or stuff on the internet that somehow horse paste, stops this. Why we have put our political identity, that's like hydroxychloroquine, why we have put our political identity tattooed based on what our medical, reaction to COVID is. Look, COVID doesn't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. COVID doesn't care, whether you believe hydroxychloroquine or, horse paste, invective, whatever that stuff's called, works. All it knows is it found a host and it's going to replicate. And to me, I'm sometimes bewildered by the fact that science is ignored on medical stuff, but the internet is taken as gospel. Let me also say, too, doctors and medical community, they don't have a profit motive in selling you vaccines, but people that want to sell you horse paste have a profit motive in that. But anyway, so let me go next to, we're going to go to Nancy in Pontiac. Hey, Nancy, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for taking my call. It leads into this nicely because what you were just talking about with the ivermectin. There is a TV purported news station, Fox News, that some of its commentators have promoted that and other misinformation. And I just wonder if Representative Kinzinger thinks that is there anything in existing law, or should there be laws to stop the presentation of really dangerous misinformation to the public from purported news stations?
Yeah, well, thank you. And look, it's an issue that I've been struggling with, and particularly in the last few years, about what is protected First Amendment speech and what isn't. It's the old example of you can't run into a theater and yell fire, but you're allowed to have political opinions. I think in this country, we've gotten to the point where we now think, that just because we have a First Amendment right, that we're going to go out and push the line, push the limit, lie to people, be dishonest, and it's dangerous. And, when you have, I think one of the things that would be interesting to look at is, for instance, on these news channels, being clear about what is opinion and what is news. A lot of the times you'll see these opinion shows that kind of masquerade as news. They'll start with an important news story and then go off into opinion there. I wish I had the right answer for you, or the brilliant answer, or the one that I know is going to solve all the problems. I don't. I can tell you that whether it's misinformation about that, or whether it's, the significant amount of Russian misinformation that comes into this country that tries to pit groups against each other, but I know it's a serious thing. The most important thing we can do, I think, is everybody has to teach your kids and take responsibility for yourself for what information you consume and what you find as fact. If you see a story on the internet that seems outrageous, it probably is worth looking on the facts of that to see if it's true, because I'm going to tell you there are a lot of websites out there that act like, look like, and have names like real news sites. You'll see something called like the National Report or something like that. Seems like a legitimate news website, but that is actually something like that is where Russia can create a story that looks legitimate, post it on there, and then you start having more legitimate news sites reference that. It's a real issue, and as Americans, to know that Russia and China and Iran, with such little cost of entry, is basically turning Americans against each other. That's a huge issue. By the way, we know for a fact that Russia and China tried to exploit vaccine hesitancy, tried to exploit COVID to divide Americans too. Unfortunately, it's not reported on enough. So let me now go. We could probably take one more question, and then I'll see if the doctors have any closing remarks. And keep in mind, you can always, again, as I mentioned, leave a message at the end of this if you didn't get a chance. We have so many people that wanted to ask questions. But let's go to I think Kim in DeKalb. Kim, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. So, I'm a nurse and I'm fully vaccinated, and I have some coworkers who are pregnant and vaccinated, but they're hesitant to get the booster because they can't find any studies that have shown pregnant women getting the booster. Obviously, it's new. But I would figure if there's nothing really introduced, if it's a booster, everything that's in it should have been given in the first 2 doses, so it should be safe for pregnant women, correct?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll kick that. I guess, Dr. Lynn, you can start. If you have any closing remarks to tag on to that, we'll kick it over to Dr. Trundy.
Sure. Absolutely. And remember, it's a matter of timing. Right now, the current recommendation is unless you have some immunosuppressive problem or organ transplant, or where you're taking medication, that you should wait 8 months after your initial completion of your vaccine series to get boosted. And so there's probably not very many pregnant women who fall into that category given the length of pregnancy. But I feel there is no evidence to suggest, as you pointed out, that this should be harmful. they should go with the same vaccine they received before. We know those are safe. We know that they've been that was well tolerated. And so I'll take the theoretical situation: a woman who was vaccinated so early in pregnancy that she still hasn't delivered, and now it's 8 months later. That's kind of a theoretical picture. Yes, you should be receive the vaccine as a booster. Congressman, in my closing remark, I just want to urge people that we still need to be cognizant that mask wearing is useful and helpful. It's inexpensive. It's safe. There's no dangers of wearing a mask because I use the analogy. It's like if you can find a new car to buy nowadays, it's loaded with safety mechanisms and very high tech and less high tech ones such as seatbelts. But we still urge you to drive safely because the same thing with being fully vaccinated. If you come in contact with enough virus, you may develop what we call a breakthrough infection. Even though the majority of these are minor, you don't want to chance it because there's that rare situation where this minor thing may end up becoming more severe. So again, follow the recommendations on mask wearing. I know it's a nuisance, but it does help.
Well, and Dr. I'll kick it over. Thank you, Dr. Lynn. Dr. Chundy, I'll say something before you go, and then I'll give your closing remarks. A lot of people ask me about the vaccine mandates, particularly in the military. And let me say, as a military officer myself, if you knew the number of vaccinations we got when we joined the military, I think the military is right to mandate the COVID vaccine for military members. And I can tell you, as a military member, we're mandated to get even the flu shot every year. And, not until this vaccine, during a pandemic, has there been any real pushback from, anybody in the Pentagon or anybody in the military, because it's an understanding. When you join the military, they're going to protect you and put some of these vaccines in you that you need. We got, vaccinated from smallpox, even though that's been a disease that, thanks to vaccines, has been eradicated. But the military, I'm supportive of that mandate. So, Dr. Chundy, I'll kick it over to you and go from there.
Yeah, so Congressman, thank you. I think the military stuff is a readiness issue. If you have half of your troops that are with COVID, you're going to have a problem. But anyway, the biggest issue, I think, is what you talked about with this disinformation, which is directed disinformation, which is dividing Americans one on another. But Chicago has done Illinois has done some great things. Lollapalooza was an example of what happens if you vaccinate everybody and you have a controlled environment. You can actually have a joyful gathering and do it safely. Indoors is unsafe. Okay, if you're indoors with unvaccinated people with this Delta variant, all the unvaccinated people will catch it. If you're indoors, you need to be masked, especially when the rates are high. If your rates are low, you don't need to be masked. And, be as safe as possible, a little bit of distancing, opening a window, keeping a fan on, having the air blow out. These are all, very common sense things that work, And please try to, not be angry with the person that's unvaccinated, but try to convince them in a gentle way. Because yelling and screaming at one another does not work. We need to be civil society. We need to treat each other with respect and love and compassion. And that tends to work with people. Because, I remember after 9/11 how the country came together. And here we are fighting tooth and nail over things that are really settled facts. And so I just wish we could change this. And just one poignant thing about unvaccinated people. I was at a hospital on Sunday rounding, and we had the mother who was unvaccinated. Both dad and all the kids were vaccinated. And the dad said to him, "Please don't tell her we're vaccinated." We did it behind her back, and she was such an anti-vaxxer. She ended up on a ventilator. She may or may not survive. And, and the guy loved her. We still took care of her. But it was tragic to watch this. I just don't want that to happen anymore. And if we can spend an hour of our time to stop this from happening, I'd be happy to do it every day, all day. So thank you.
That's very powerful. Thank you. And just another quick aside. So as a pilot, most people think when you're on an airplane, don't put the air on you because it's just recycled air. Actually, in an airplane, every 2 or 3 minutes, that air is completely new because actually all the air from your vent comes off the bleed air of the engine. It had been up to 400 degrees. You're at 30,000 feet. Virus doesn't exist up there. And so actually, if you're on an airplane, putting that vent on you is actually can help kind of create an air barrier. That's a little airplane knowledge I'll bring. So, to everybody, thank you for spending time with us today. Dr. Chundy, Dr. Lynn, thank you for your time. Go out, get vaccinated. If you haven't, get ready for your booster when you hit 8 months, and God bless everybody. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, hey, everybody, thanks for taking a little time today. Thanks for being on the line. This is Congressman Adam Kinzinger, and we have a couple of special guests with us today that I'll interview in a little bit. But one of the things we're doing is just giving people an opportunity to hear from these